Hi there, it's me, your friendly neighborhood humble stroke assaulter. I've done a video on aphasia, done another one on apraxia and aphasia, so when apraxia and aphasia conspire against you together. And now I'm going to do apraxia in general. So apraxia is a neurological disorder, and you almost exclusively end up with apraxia due to an injury or an insult to the brain. So you've got a brain injury, you've got a tumor, you've had some kind of brain surgery and it kind of went sideways, you've had a stroke. Apraxia is a neurological condition. Now, we're going to, and again, this is not going to be a definitive resource on apraxia. I'm not a doctor. I've only played one on TV. The only licenses I have are firearms and driving. So I'm not licensed to distinguish or diagnose or treat any of these things that I speak about. It's information. I had a stroke, and I know that some people may be looking for information. I'm going to include, again, in the links in the description of all the documents I found. One thing I did find was a 21-page PowerPoint on apraxia, and I found a 216-page document on apraxia and its treatment, and some other things I found, so I'll include those. So let's just talk about apraxia and what that's going to mean to not only the stroke assaulter, but those that are assisting and supporting the stroke assaulter as they try to find their life again. So apraxia, it's a cognitive motor planning disorder, right, leading to an inability to perform actions in the absence of weakness or sensory loss. So let's just break that from medical speak to human. So it's a cognitive motor disorder. So the brain to the muscles and the nerves and moving, right, and planning, right, leading to an inability to perform tasks. So something you used to be able to do, you can't do. And there are no corresponding issues of damage. So it's not like you've, got a broken arm, or you've been in some kind of accident or injury where you've got muscular damage, or you're blind in an eye, right? Or you're partially deaf, right? 1/3 of those in rehabilitation centers and nursing homes after a left brain stroke, left hemispheric stroke, right? And it's a disorder of learned voluntary actions resulting from neurological impairment. So things that you've learned, things that you would have to commit action to. So it's not like you're breathing or you're blinking of your eyes. It could be making pancakes, right? I'm lucky in a way. I used to work with brain injury clients. This is my last job in mental health. So when I got out of the hospital, I found one of my activation manuals, and I found exercises. I like to cook, and I knew eventually I'm going to have to feed myself. So I figured it would be advantageous to do a few things. So just think about the steps in making pancakes. Okay? From making a list, to going to the grocer, to purchasing the items, to coming home, putting the items away where they belong, right? And then being able to get the recipe out and following the recipe step by step, line by line, and not omitting something or overdoing something. Well, it needs 2 eggs, let's put in 6. Or underdoing something, it says a cup of milk, let's put in half a cup, right? Putting all the sequences of events in the right order with the right amount of effort, right? So with apraxia, there's ideomotor and ideational, and we're going to define our terms as we go through, right? So ideomotor apraxia is a disorder in the initiation and execution of planned sequences of movement. The concept of the task is understood, but the movements lack the correct force, direction, and timing to achieve a motor goal. Let's take driving. Right? The most people that are going to end up having their licenses taken after a stroke, who are lucid, like you're not in a coma or you're not in a chronic vegetative state, it's because of apraxia, right? Put the signal on, turn the wheel, off gas, slight brake, right? Just think about that, right? You go to turn the corner. You remember to turn the blinker on. Do you turn it on the right direction? Right? You go to turn the wheel. Do you turn the wheel with the right amount of force, right? With the correction at the right moment? Do you let go of the wheel at the right moment? Or are you all of a sudden, making a 90-degree Wile E. Coyote turn, right? Do you take your foot off the gas and then brake and then reverse that at the right time? If you're driving a standard vehicle, do you know how to work a clutch, right? So, and then ideational apraxia is a disorder in the performance of skilled activity because the concept of action related to the object is impaired. It's a disturbance in conceptual organization of actions. Well, let's take something, a skilled activity, cooking, right? Specifically baking, right? Because baking is chemistry. So take a chocolate chip cookie recipe. After my stroke, a coworker had a death in the family, and my work, although I was on leave of absence, had organized a bake sale, and a friend of mine was putting it together, so I said I would help out because I want to feel useful. I made 7 dozen chocolate chip cookies. Now that was a purposeful amount because there was a bake sale at work. So I had to do it in 3 batches. Just think about that. You're going to make just 1 batch of chocolate chip cookies. Okay, so you got eggs, you got flour, you got butter, you got brown sugar, you got the chocolate chips, you got the oven, you got, are you able to do it in the right order, right? And that's one of the things I did to challenge myself about after my stroke was let's try cooking because you got to eat. And once I trusted myself, right? So what if you make the cookies but they never find the oven? What if you put them in the oven and you figure 3 minutes is cooked enough at 550 degrees, Now, let's get into skilled performances such as work. When you go back to work, right, that could be an issue. So, there is no one test for apraxia. There's no definitive, we do one test only, right? They're going to do a series of tests. So, and that's because it all depends on what the thing is they need to test for. So, driving, I had to do tests at my occupational therapist, and she said that I scored high enough that I don't need to see my GP to have him do tests. Well, that means that the test for driving that I did has a threshold, and if I score above that threshold, there's no need for me to see my GP for him to refer me for specialized testing. Well, I don't know what that specialized testing is, so because I scored above the threshold. Right? So they're going to have behavioral tests, things that are done in a functional setting, right? Like making a cold drink, putting a piece of paper in an envelope, hole punching paper and putting it in the right size file folder. Literally, can you put a round circle in a round hole? But they're going to give you 3 or 4 size circles and 3 or 4 size holes, and they want you to put the right thing in the right place. Right? So there are various screening tools that could be used, and it all depends on what your deficits are perceived as. So they could use an observational method using 4 daily activities. Each activity is scored on a point rating scale, right? So it all depends on, are they looking for spatial orientation errors, temporal imprecision errors, meaning timing, errors in the force of movement, uh, poor distal differentiation, gesture enhancement, vocalization. So when it comes to ideomotor apraxis, meaning performance errors, they're looking for, when you go to pick something up, are you able to pick it up? Like, so my pill bottle, for example, so make sure you can't see who I am. My pill bottle, right? When I go to put it down, and then I move my head away, can I find it again, right? Can I pick it up again, right? When I go to pick it up, is it a jerky grab, right? Am I able to open the lid on the bottle, right? Trust me, that took practice, right? Just to be able to do something as simple as this. And I'm holding onto it in an all-around beer can grasp. It's just to show you that some people may have force of movement issues because they feel the need they have to, really hold on for dear life. Now, are you using inappropriate object use? Meaning you go to make a cup of coffee, but you try to put it in a bowl or on a plate. Are you having sequencing errors? Meaning you either forget to do something or you don't complete the task. Are you blending sequences together, right? So again, we'll go back to the chocolate chip cookie making, right? So I found my grandmother's recipe for chocolate chip cookies, and I figured I'll make those because they're yummy. Well, there's a couple of steps in there. Like you've got to melt some butter. You've got to add this, then that, right? So did I forget to add the eggs? Did I add too many eggs? Right? Instead of grabbing a mixing bowl, did I try to mix it, on a plate or without a bowl at all? Right? Am I blending sequences together where, I'm gonna add, hot butter to a cold egg? Am I gonna not complete the action? Right? So there's many things there when it comes to ideational apraxia with performance errors. Just think about making cookies, right? And the things that could go wrong with that, right? Now, there are several cognitive rehabilitation approaches, so this is completely solvable, right? There's restitution aimed at reducing specific cognitive deficits. There's specific skills training aimed at improving a functional task. And then you get substitution or cognitive strategy training where you learn new ways to deal with old problems, right? So let's take buttons, right? Buttons. Buttons still pose an issue for and with me at times. So what I learned to do was leave the shirt on the hanger, do up everything but the top two buttons, because I could do them up easily on the hanger because it was in front of me, slip into the shirt, and then button up as necessary. So I had to cheat. However, by doing the buttons up on the shirt on the hanger, I still got better at doing buttons, right? And then eventually, I still, depending on the button, can have the odd problem, but it's not the swearing fit that it was 3 months ago, right? And when you're looking at other things, you want to look at your activities in context. You want to look at in the appropriate environment, right? So things that you're going to do at work, you will almost always do at work. Things that you're going to do at home, you're almost always going to do at home. And things that you do for recreation and leisure are almost always going to be done in that environment. So when it comes to, let's take ice skating, because it's winter in Canada and there's snow. Well, ice skating. You either need a lake or open body water that is suitably frozen and safe to enter onto, or you need a rink, right? You can't skate in your living room, right? So you're not going to try ice hockey and skating routines in your living room. You may want to sit on your stairs and try to get into your skates, right? So you sit, with skate guards, so you're not going to damage your floor. You sit on a chair or your stairs or somewhere, and you try getting in and out of your skates. Well, in context, you're rehearsing getting into skates. Is it the appropriate environment? Not necessarily, but you're practicing it where it's appropriate, so that when you get into the right environment, you're having less difficulty. So it's also a sense of, in the counseling world, they call it covert sensitization. Right? Now, errorless learning. There's no such thing as errorless learning. You're going to make mistakes as you learn, right? Then you have task-specific training, right? Think about it. Everything you've learned how to do throughout your life required training. Tying your shoes. Eating soup without slurping. Going to the grocery store, right? You were trained how to do these things. And now it's just something you know how to do. It's just part of your day in, day out. Well, there are maybe specific things that you are struggling with post-stroke that you're going to have to specifically learn that one thing again. That could be driving. That could be tying your shoes. That could be buttons, right? Then goal-directed activity, right? As I said before, and I'm going to do a specific video on goal setting and strokes. Using the SMART acronym. However, it's slightly different for stroke folk. So, in this case, you're going to have a specifically worded goal, and the target is important, not the time. Let me just say that again. The target is important. It is important for me to be able to conquer buttons. And I'm not going to put a time on it. Right? I'm not going to say it's going to be a 2-week endeavor or a 3-week endeavor, or I'm going to do it tomorrow by noon. My goal is to conquer buttons, right? And then you're going to do, things that are like practice and repetition, practice and repetition, practice and repetition. And you're going to keep doing it, but the tasks have to be meaningful. It's not going to be just busy work, right? Because if you're just simulating nonsense, you're not going to get anything meaningful out of it, right? Now, depending on your level of stroke impact, depending on how you've been impacted, right, I can't make any specific guarantees. Much like your neurologist and your other medical practitioners will give you a very expensive, educated guess, I'm going to give you a very inexpensive, educated guess. Will physiotherapy and occupational therapy and other rehabilitation strategies help apraxia? Yes, they will. How will they help you? I don't know. Right? That is dependent upon a litany of factors. One of them is how bad do you want to get there, right? The other one is how devastating was your stroke, right? Like if you were left bound in a wheelchair, you might make a goal out of, running the Boston Marathon, but is it realistic and is it relevant? If you are left with significant neurological deficits that would make certain things impracticable, if not unsafe, you got to think about that, right? So you've got to occasionally, as you're doing some of these relearning techniques, do a gut check, right? You are going to need assistance. You are going to need people to support you. You might even need a spotter, right? Make sure you don't hit the floor. Now, the big thing is when you are in a rehab and recovery facility, right? It is their goal, be it inpatient or outpatient, is their goal to get you back to being as independent as is reasonably possible at home and in society, right? So whether you're in a rehab recovery facility or you're like me and you did your rehab and recovery on an outpatient basis, right? It is the goal of your occupational therapist, your speech and language, your physiotherapist, counselor, whoever else is involved in that clinical team, and your neurologist. It's their goal to get you back into the world, right? Because you're going to do the recovery in a hospital bed. you're going to do the rehab in a hospital bed and or at home. And the reintegration, that's once you get home, right? And that's where I'm at the reintegration stage, right? So when you go to reintegrate into the world, you can do so with limited obstacles, right? So the tasks that you're going to be taught in the rehab setting should be transferable to your home setting. So you're not going to learn anything that isn't immediately applicable and appropriate to you getting back out into the world, right? And you're going to go from intervention techniques that go from a trained to a non-trained or related tasks, right? So they're going to start out with the most important things that you need to have to be at home and independent and safe, right? How to turn on a stove, how to turn off a stove, how to use a knife, how to cut your food, how to tie your shoes, how to use an iron, things that day in, day out keep you safe, right? And keep you fed and keep you active and integrated with your world, right? And then they're going to go into things that aren't necessarily, they're going to go into things like, I don't even know, like grip strength with your medically approved Play-Doh. You might get Lego to work on fine motor dexterity, right? Things like that. So just keep in mind that apraxia, right, it may be related to communication deficits, and I've done a video about that. The apraxia I'm talking about in this video is not related to communication deficits. It's related to the fact that you have a neurological deficit that is presenting in such a manner that is preventing you from completing tasks, right? And just as you get home from the hospital, as you get back into your world, you need to be realistic, right? With yourself and with the people around you. You need to be very realistic. You need to make sure that if something causes a difficulty, you voice your concerns with your support system, your friends, your family, coworkers, neurologist, psychologist, counselor, physiotherapist, what have you, right? You direct your questions to them and you let them know, hey, I'm having a bit of a problem right now. Because ultimately, if you're not realistic with your clinical team, you're not realistic with yourself. And if you're not going to be realistic with yourself, you're setting yourself up for failure. And trust me, the stroke is going to take enough away from you that you don't need extra failure. The stroke is going to create enough of a disturbance in your life that you don't need to compound that in any way. Let's just be honest here. The most difficult thing you're ever going to do was get back to your world the way it was before your stroke. And I appreciate for some people that may not be a complete possibility. And I try to recognize the fact that I'm lucky, right? I'm going to pretty much have a, almost complete recovery, right? So just keep in mind, for those of you that are going through the assaulting of your stroke, getting to the objective of getting back to your world, right? There are two types of apraxia: ideational for performance errors, right, and ideomotor, right? So performance errors, right? One is about spatial errors, right? Timing errors. The other one is about sequencing. Right? You may have one without the other. You may have both. That is completely difficult in that case, and I can't even imagine what that would be like, right? But just keep in mind, both. The rehab is not easy, right? But it requires you to want to improvise, adapt, overcome, and then finally persevere. If you're not willing to do those four things, it's not going to get any better. It's just not. Buttons sometimes can still present an issue for me. Tying shoes, I still don't like tying shoes. But I'm now at the stage where I don't have a choice because winter's here. Winter is coming. It's already here. So I now have to wear boots, and boots require tying. So I'm going to land the plane now because we're at the 25-minute mark. So if you like what you've been watching over the past almost 5 months, please like, share, subscribe with your friends. If you happen to either going through the assaulting through your own stroke recovery, or you're supporting someone, or you happen to know someone that is either an assaulter or a supporter, please point the channel to them. Like, share, subscribe. If there's something you want to see me cover, either leave the comments down below, or you can email me directly at strokeassaulter@gmail.com. Right? And I say again, strokeassaulter@gmail.com. And if you happen to see either in yourself or someone around you the signs or symptoms of a stroke, that being someone that looks befuddled, right? They just look confused. Vision or eye issues. Suddenly that you can't see properly. You see stars. Things are blurry. You can't see at all. Can't see out of one eye. People that have facial droop, either one side or both sides. Inability to raise both arms equally effectively or at all. Slurred, stuttering speech, inappropriate word usage for situation or context. Inability to smile equally effectively or at all. Inability to maintain your own body weight. Or general body weakness or weakness on one side. Please immediately place that person in a position of comfort and dial 911.